Some of the controversy surrounding tariffs and the conversation about tariffs comes back to US production, right? Because that's what this is all about. Now, you can argue about the strategic elements of when we should launch the tariffs or how we should use them, whether or not they're a prelude to negotiation, are they being communicated correctly? But just generally speaking, we do need to bring a lot of American production in general back to America. I look at this through the lens of seafood and beef, but let's talk about seafood because I think it's a great microcosm for the conversation as a whole and people can understand it more. The majority of seafood that is caught in the United States is caught here and it is shipped overseas in order to be processed, frozen, and packaged and then sent back to the United States. So we buy it. 80% of the seafood that we consume in the US is imported. So much of that is actually caught here, but then it's shipped overseas and brought back. We don't have the large-scale processing facilities that we once had here, especially along the coast in the United States, because of just calling it out for what it is. The cost of labor, the role that labor unions have played in jacking the price of labor up, the EPA, the FDA, and so many of the other regulatory agencies that have just piled paperwork upon paperwork and regulations to increase the cost of opening a processing facility, especially like all of the federal agencies that inspect and then push those prices or push those costs onto the business. I don't think a lot of people realize this, but like in USDA facilities, meat packing facilities and meat processing facilities, you actually have to have a USDA inspector on site. You pay for him, you pay for his office. It's almost like he's an employee or she's an employee, but you're paying for all of that. So the cost of doing this has forced all of these US businesses to ship this overseas. Now the problem with that is that it's not just a matter of economics. This is why I say the idea of comparative advantage doesn't apply. It's like, well, if you can get the same apple that's brought in overseas versus an apple here in the United States, and it costs more to pay for the apple here in the US, bring it in from overseas, thus globalism, because then you're gonna have more money in your pocket to spend in the local economy. Well, it's not an apples to apples comparison. It's actually about food safety and also about security, right? I say this in terms of national security because when we're bringing these products in from overseas and they've processed them over there, they're pouring chemicals, there's antibiotic residues, and there's all of these other elements that are in our food that are getting there, toxic elements that are getting there through these international processing facilities, and only 2% of the products that come in through the US are inspected by the FDA. So much slips through the cracks. You can Google this, you can look up all of these kind of third-party stories in which they've actually used private testing to see what types of chemicals there are in the food, and it's astounding. So that's another reason why we need to bring back US production, US processing, especially these US facilities. Now, that's gonna take some government help, right? That's gonna take some subsidies or loopholes in order to incentivize banks and private investors to invest in small and medium-sized businesses. It's not the big guys that I worry about. They got a lot of cash on the sidelines. They're already set up to raise more capital, whether it's through IPOs, reverse IPOs, what have you. But let's just say I wanted to get together with like 20 of my friends and utilize our brain matter in order to create a US facility. We're gonna need to get the capital to do so. And the government can help incentivize that and perhaps even underwrite or subsidize some of it, because in the long run, it's creating a safer economy for the US. So, long diatribe. We got to bring it back to the US. Seafood is really the industry in which it's emblematic of how many problems we have with imported and exported products, especially considering we're catching most of it here in the US and shipping it overseas.